Closing your first deal could be the beginning of your real estate career, or it could be the end of it. A lot of new agents close their first deal, cash the check, and start believing the business is working. But if you do not study where that deal came from and build a system behind it, the first closing can become a false positive. After coaching hundreds of agents, I have seen this happen over and over again. New agents work hard for the first closing, but they do not slow down long enough to turn that deal into a system. So in this video, I'm going to break down what to do after your first real estate deal so you do not waste the momentum. Let's get right into it. The first mistake new agents make after closing their first deal is treating it like the finish line. Now, I understand why that happens. The first deal is a big deal. It proves someone trusted you. It proves that you can get through a transaction. And while that matters and you should celebrate it, you also have to understand what the first deal really is. It is not the finish line. It is the first piece of evidence. The question should not be, can you close a deal? The question really needs to be, can you create another one on purpose? That is where business starts, because if you close one deal and go right back to waiting and hoping and reacting, you've not built a business yet. You've completed a transaction. That transaction may have been excellent. You may have served the client well. You may have learned a ton. The next stage is different. Now you have to study the deal. You have to understand where it came from, why it happened, what the relationship created, and what behavior you can repeat. Most new agents miss that. They treat the closing like proof that everything is working, and sometimes it is proof. Sometimes, though, it's just a lucky opening. The difference is whether you learn from it. After your first closing, one of the most important things you can do is track where the deal actually came from. And I don't mean just writing sphere in your CRM and moving on. That is too vague to teach you anything useful. You need to understand the path. How did the person enter your world? Why did they trust you in the first place? Which conversation opened the door and made them ready to act? That's the kind of detail that helps you build a business, because when you understand the source of the deal, you can start to see what is repeatable. If the client comes from an old job, they may just be the opportunity in your former professional network. If that client comes from an open house, that open house was not just a weekend task. It was a business source that deserves a follow-up process. And if your client comes from your sphere, then visibility might be working even if it feels slow. This is why source tracking matters. The deal is not just income, it is information. And if you do not capture the information, you lose half the value of the closing. Do not just close the file, capture the lesson. The next thing to understand is that a closed client should not become a closed relationship. That is where a lot of newer agents quietly lose future business. They work hard during the transaction. They get to the closing table and they hand over the keys, but then they disappear. Not because they don't care. Usually it is because it feels a little awkward. They don't know when to reach out, so they assume the client will remember them if they did a good job. That assumption is very expensive. People are busy by nature. They may love you and still forget to refer you. That is why you need a post-closing plan. Ask for the review while the experience is still fresh. Send a personal thank you that just feels human and not generic, but make sure that the client is actually in your database with enough context for future follow-up to feel natural. Then stay in touch in a way that continues the relationship instead of only showing up when you need something. That last part matters. The goal is to become the agent that they're actually glad to hear from, and that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you lead the relationship after closing. Your first deal should create the next 5 conversations. That does not mean you should brag. It means you should use the moment to make your real estate business visible. A new agent can say something simple. I just helped my first client through a sale and a purchase, and it reminded me of how many people have real estate questions long before they're ready to make a move. So if you are thinking through anything real estate related this year, I'm happy to be a resource. That kind of message is not desperate. What it is very clear. It tells people what you do and gives them permission to ask a question and creates a reason for conversations. You can reach out personally to people you know and say something like, I just wrapped up my first closing and I'm trying to be intentional about building my business the right way. If you know anyone who has a real estate question, I'd be grateful if you kept me in mind. Again, that is not begging. What it is leadership. The mistake new agents make is they wait for people to notice. Don't wait. Use that momentum. Talk about the win in a way that creates trust, not in a way that makes you look like you're performing success. People do not need you to pretend that you're a top producer. They do need to know that you're active, you're serious, and you're available to help. That is enough. After your first deal, you should build a repeatable system immediately. This is where the first closing can become the beginning of a real business. Start by documenting what happened. Where did the client come from? What did you do that helped the relationship move forward? What was the first conversation? How long did it take from the first conversation to closing? Also, what follow-up happened along the way and what would you do better the next time? Ladies and gentlemen, feedback is the breakfast of champions. Make sure you're eating your Wheaties every day. Those questions, they're not busy work. They help you turn experience into a model. Because without a model, you may accidentally turn your first deal into a lucky event, and lucky events are hard to repeat. The system does not need to be complicated. You need a place to keep your contacts. You need a simple way to track who might do business in the future. You need a follow-up rhythm that you can actually sustain. That is what keeps you from becoming the agent who closes one deal and then disappears for 3 months. The goal is to make sure every meaningful relationship has a next step. That is it. That is the beginning of a business. The first commission check can mess with your head in a good way and in a dangerous way. It can feel amazing because real estate finally becomes real. The work produced money, the risk paid off, and the business gave you just a glimpse of what could be possible. You should enjoy that, but do not let the check make the future feel easier than it is. This is where agents get themselves in trouble. They assume the next client will come the way the first client came. Sometimes it does, but you cannot build a business on sometimes. You have to use the first check as motivation to get more disciplined, not as permission to relax. That does not mean you should live in panic. It means you should respect the moment. The first deal gives you energy. Your job is to turn that energy into structure before it disappears. Because once the celebration fades, you're still going to wake up one morning and need to know what to do. That is where real business begins. So if you just cleared your first real estate deal, congratulations. Seriously, that is a real accomplishment. But do not stop there. Your first deal is not the finish line. It is the first piece of evidence. Now your job is to study it, learn from it, and use it to create the next conversation. Ask for the review, stay in touch with the client, track where that deal came from. The story is the way that makes your business visible. Build a simple follow-up system before the momentum disappears, because the worst thing you can do after the first closing is vanish and wait for the next client to magically show up. Your first deal should become data, not dopamine. It should teach you something, create conversations, and help you build a business that does not depend on luck. Because closing one deal proves you can sell real estate. Creating the next one on purpose is where the business starts.